first you've got to concentrate your mind, and then you can quiet your mind. Right? And so when I say sit and do nothing, what I really mean is sit and just breathe.
Hey, welcome to the Empire Show. My name is Bedros, and this is an inside look. Today we have someone really awesome with us, retired Navy SEAL Commander, Mr. Mark Devine. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hooyah, Bedros.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you, man.
Likewise.
Again.
Thank you for coming out to HQ, first of all.
It's my pleasure.
And, you know, San Diego and Chino Hills are probably an hour and a half apart, but depending on California traffic, it could be 4 hours apart. So I appreciate you making that trek down here. You and I met through a mutual friend, Shane, and he introduced us because I needed some understanding into a situation that took place during the project, and you were kind enough to have explained
to shed some understanding.
Yes, it was a very, very unique.
Yeah, we won't go there.
Yeah, we won't go deep into that, but it was a very unique situation that only a small handful of people have had that experience, and I appreciate you guiding me through that. But that said, just hit it off with you, man. And so, you know, so here's a guy, ladies and gentlemen, who I sent him steaks just as a thank you for spending time with me on the phone. He gets the steaks, and then he responds with the text message, am I coming to your house or are you coming to my house for us to have the steaks together? Right. Keep in mind, I probably sent, no joke, about 600 steaks to 600 people over the last 5 years through DeBraga. And no one's offered that. So I was like, dude, come on down. I'll eat the steaks with you. So it was a great experience. And we had a lot of belly laughs. So,
and the corollary to that story is when I got home after our dinner,
I
was like, I'm going to order some more of these steaks. They're so darn delicious. And I log onto the website and I'm like, holy these things are expensive.
They're not
$120 a pop.
Yeah, they're not cheap.
So you got good taste, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. And look, I'm not sponsored by DeBragas. The show's not sponsored by DeBragas. It should be. Yeah. So DeBragas, if you're paying attention, hook me up with some discounts,
and
or at least
hook me up with commission steaks.
Right, exactly, and send this guy some commission steaks. But that said, dude, you've done so much, and you know, from SEAL Fit to your best-selling books. And the way, when I look at you and what Mark Devine has done with my outside eyes, you are a developer of humans, of human performance, beyond leadership. And so I thought that would be a great place to start doing this deep dive. And like all people who develop humans, they first start by developing themselves.
That's right.
So what was the path that led you into the teams?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, kind of like you, Bedros, I think, I'm a great experimenter, and I don't like to experiment on other people unless I've tried it myself.
Sure.
And so I started experimenting first with, you know, endurance sports and, you know, like long time in the wilderness using the terrain of my childhood, which is upstate New York.
Yeah.
And so I had 6 million acres in the Adirondack Park to play in.
Wow.
And so I was like, I never heard of rucking before, but I used to go out with a backpack alone.
Before rucking was rucking.
Yeah, before rucking. Yeah. And this is when I was, you know, 16, 17, and come back, you know, 15 hours later, after having summited a couple peaks and run down them and, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Dehydrated as heck, and, you know, like, okay, that's not going to work. I need to bring some food along
Next
here.
time, food, water.
Right,
check.
and you know, if I'm going to run down a mountain in these craggy, you know, Adirondack mountains, then I need to like wrap my knees and take care of my joints. And, you know, so, and I just love the experience of that endorphin rush. And also, most importantly, related to kind of me becoming a SEAL, what would happen to my mind when I pushed through all the resistance of all the pain and the suffering of, you know, moving really fast under load, and all of a sudden just breaking through to that rarefied territory, right? Some of it's, you know, there's a biochemical aspect, there's an emotional aspect, and then there's this kind of spiritual aspect of it. Didn't know what that was, but it felt good. Total long flow state periods. And then like I would get to some destination and peak, and I'd look out over the Adirondacks, and it's just stunningly beautiful, and I'm sitting up there alone, you know, got my peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and I would drop into what I now call meditation. All this is happening in my 17 to like 20-year-old period. During that time, I go to Colgate University, become a competitive swimmer, get into triathlon. So I was, just really experimenting with all these different physical modalities, strength training and whatnot. Anyway, everything took a shift when I went to New York after college and started my first career as a certified public accountant.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
How do you go from like summoning to sitting behind a desk, man?
I always got to be careful because you never know how many wonderful CPAs are listening.
Great humans. Great humans.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Like I kid you not, I would rather go back through SEAL training than try to sit for that darn CPA exam again.
Sure. Oh man.
Like what a pain.
Did you pass the first time?
It took me 4 tries.
Did it? Okay.
4 tries. I passed. Well, New York. Whatever. We could spend 20 minutes talking about this useless stuff. So.
Yeah. I was just curious.
CPA exam anxiety. It took me
I've
4
heard
times.
it's hard. I know nothing about it. I was just curious.
I wasn't destined to be a CPA, but it was a great first career. The whole idea was, I'm going to go back and run the family business someday. It's upstate New York. I was kind of groomed for that. That's what the Divine Boys do. It's multi-generational. Story, baked into me from birth. And so I'm following I'm a good little drummer.
Sure.
Doing the stuff I'm supposed to do. Never really examining myself. Now, you would think that all those long hikes and all the time and flow that I'd be examining myself. No, I was just loving the experience.
Okay, I was just about to ask that.
Right? So it's one thing to be an athlete and to enjoy, or to be a business owner to enjoy the thrill of the quest. It's another thing to do deep self-introspective work. They're both valuable. Mm-hmm. One's internally focused, the other's externally focused. So I'll get to where I'm going with this. So I'm in New York now, and I'm going to school part-time at night. I'm working full-time during the day for Coopers & Lybrand, now PricewaterhouseCoopers. I get up early in the morning to go do my run, and then at lunchtime I go to the gym. I do my HIIT workout. This is in the 80s, early mid-80s. And then I had a 2-hour block of time between when they said, okay, check, you're done here at work, because we know you got school at 7:30 at NYU. And so I'm like, great, 2 hours. There's another training block. Right?
Huh.
So I got to find something to fit in there.
Sure.
Didn't want to go back to the gym, wasn't ready to take another run. I'm like, what am I going to do? And one day I was walking by down 23rd Street, and I was living on 22nd, and I passed this second floor of this building, and I hear all this noise coming out, like screams and shouts, and I'm like, what the hell's going on up there? And I'm standing under this big flag, and I look up, and it's got a lotus flower on it, and it says, World Headquarters, Sado Karate.
Had you done any kind of martial arts previous to that?
No. No exposure to it, except for my freshman roommate at college who took up Shotokan karate, and that's a whole kind of cool story in itself. So I'm intrigued. I go upstairs, and I'm like, what is this? And there, at the far end of the floor, is this, 5'7" Japanese guy, built like a tank, right? And he's barking out orders, and you're like, oh man, like that's the real deal. And then all of a sudden, he cracks a joke, and he starts laughing like a school kid, you know what I mean? And everyone's cackling with him, and there's all these black belts, everyone from 1st degree to 6th degree black belts.
Sure.
From the tri-state area. I was like, this is wild. Like, who is this guy,
Huh.
So I signed up on the spot. Well, it turns out Mr. Nakamura, Grandmaster, had started this style of karate. He was the head instructor for a really worldwide style called Kyokushinkai. I can't even say it.
Okay.
The founder of that style, named Masayama, was famous for chopping the horn off of a charging bull with his hand.
Oh, that's pretty hardcore.
That's hardcore, right?
Yeah.
So this is real deal.
Yeah.
Nakamura was famous for the Thai kickboxers challenged the entire martial arts world in '63. Said they're the preeminent martial art. Come challenge us. And the only people to take them up were 3 Japanese, Nakamura being one of them, and 2 of them won. Nakamura and another guy, and they had like a ticker tape parade. Anyway, I could talk forever about this guy. My first true mentor. So I joined. It turns out that Nakamura is a Zen master.
What is a Zen master?
He teaches Zen meditation, but he's a practitioner of Zen meditation, and he integrated Zen into this martial art. So we had a Zen class every Thursday night where we sat in meditation for an hour, and he taught you Zen. And then we would sit for about 5 minutes before and after every class. And then we would take these long weekend retreats at the Zen Mountain Monastery in Woodstock, New York. Now, mind you, Bedros, only a very, very small percentage of the students really took to the Zen. I was one of them, and maybe 10 other black belts, and I was a white belt. Because everyone was too busy, or they didn't get it, or it wasn't for them. And this is, again, in the
I'm
80s,
guessing you
80s.
got it because you had already experienced something similar to
Exactly.
it.
There was
earlier
something
on.
about Zen that reminded me of the bliss that I experienced alone in the wilderness on these long endurance kind of events,
Yeah.
and sitting on top of the mountain. So I was like, this is, and I remember that experience. And so very quickly after starting Zen, I started to have those experiences again, but I'm just sitting there, not doing nothing.
Right.
And I was like, wow. And then, again, this is because I wasn't focused outward trying to get somewhere, and I'm just sitting. When all the dust started to settle in my mind, I started to experience things that were different that I never experienced as an athlete, never experienced out in the wilderness. I experienced insights. I experienced like emotional releases. I experienced dread.
What did dread feel like?
Dread that I was missing something important, like the most important thing,
Oh shoot.
right? Like I was doing the wrong thing. I was
Yeah.
missing my calling.
Oh shoot.
You know, this is like the dread that people usually find after they've got the Lamborghini and they've got the
Right.
beautiful house and the beautiful wife, and they wake up and they're 55 years old and they're like, this is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife. How did I get here, right?
So, what do they call that? A midlife crisis.
midlife-
You had a midlife crisis in your 20s?
21, 22.
How do you handle that? Like, what do you do?
Well, it scared I mean, because
yeah.
I was investing so much on this path. And to change from that path, I had to kill my ego, but I also had to turn my back on my family.
How was that experience? Because so many of our audience, so many people in general, our audience or not, they have been told and conditioned by family with the best of intentions.
Of course.
That,
Yeah.
you know, whether the family business or go be a doctor, go be a lawyer, like in the Armenian culture, it's all about go be a doctor, go be a lawyer, because that's where money is. And at some point they realized that this was a miserable path.
Right.
So how do you break out of that? How do you tell your family this?
It takes great courage, you know, to be fair, Bedros, you know that as well as I do, not everyone does it, not everyone can do it.
Most don't.
Most don't, right? But I believe, unless that is your path, which it could very well be.
Sure.
Probably not, though, unless that's exactly your path, that if you don't do that, then you lead that life of quiet desperation that Emerson talks about, right? And Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. And I was living an unexamined life until I sat down and slowed down and stilled my mind and started to ask better questions. Like, if I'm experiencing dread about this, if I feel like that's not the right calling, and me as a CPA, kidding me? Or even being back to the family business, I look back now, I'm like, I'd be a tenth of the man I am today.
Sure.
I'd be living in quiet desperation. I'd probably be a raging alcoholic too.
Sure, to cope. Yeah.
To cope, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And so the answer to your question is, and this is kind of like an antidote to what's going on today, is to slow the F down, stop trying to do so much, and find time every day. This isn't a once in a while, oh, I'll find time, you know, when I go on that retreat. It's an everyday thing to find time. And you don't have to call it meditation, and you don't have to sit on a bench or, you know, in some sort of lotus position. You just sit in your chair and wait.
For what?
Wait for answers. Now, that's because everyone says, well, I can't meditate because I sit and I'm thinking. Okay, it's just, don't worry about it. Just sit and let the thinking settle down. Now, there's a lot of tools I have now to shortcut that settling process. Box breathing is probably the biggest secret weapon we have.
Can you explain that for a moment?
Sure. Now, the reason this worked for me is because of my martial arts training. Nakamura taught me that breathing through your nose and breathing in certain patterns has an effect on your mind. And so when we sat in Zen meditation, he had us slow our breathing down through the nose into these nice long loops. 10 count in, 10 count out. And later on, for my students who are Navy SEALs, I said, okay, we're going to shorten that up and we're going to add holds to it. Nakamura didn't do anything with that breath hold, because what I noticed in experimenting with that, and then later on I learned through yoga, is that first you move the energy into your body and you energize when you inhale, and then when you exhale, you release toxin, you release emotional energy, you dehydrate. There's all sorts of things, but you also relax. So the inhale is energizing, the exhale is relaxing. The inhale hold is stimulating your mind, right? And so whatever thought is in there is going to get charged up, going to get a little brighter. And the exhale hold is probably your closest opportunity to face death, because of all of a sudden I'm taking away my source of life force. And it's the time or the moment, because of that your mind is the most still, because it's like going, wait, what's happening here? And so you have a lot going on here. We don't have time to get into the physiology, breathing and all that. But so what I do is I started doing this practice where all I did was this pattern of breathing where I'd inhale for 5 counts, hold my breath for 5 counts, exhale for 5 counts, hold my breath for 5 counts. Box pattern.
Got it.
And then just discreetly hook my mind onto that. And I learned that through Zen training, because that's basic, and Zen is hard for a lot of people, because what they say in this practice and what box breathing does when you do it this way is you're going to concentrate on just that. Just that. But then your mind is going to wander, and you're going to split your attention, or you're going to just forget about that, and you're going to go all over here and off to the races again.
Yeah.
But the more you practice, the more you come back to that breath, the longer you can hold your attention on just that, and the less frequent your mind will then spin off into some drama, right? And the quicker you can bring it back to hook it back to the breath. And so these are really important skills. First, concentration. Attention control on one thing, being able to concentrate on it for longer and longer period of times, which builds mind power. It's kind of like, barbell.
Sure.
Concentration is barbell training for your brain, because you build mind power, the ability to focus on one thing for a long period of time and to penetrate it deeply without distraction.
It's funny you say something about concentration, and now more than ever in history, I think we've lost the ability to focus and concentrate.
We're all over the place. We're getting our dings and our notices.
Exactly. We're conditioned by all these devices. Yesterday, the TV show Homeland. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, I used to love that.
Yeah. So I think the first season was in 2011. So when I watched it with the wife back in the day, when my kids were small, it was one of those things where, wow, great show. We love it. We're going to keep watching it. Now, here we are 2020 or 2021, and we recently watched Game of Thrones with our kids, now that they're 15 and 13, and we fast forwarded through all the nudity. That's a whole funny story I'll tell you when we're done with this. It was a shit show. But, Andrew had his finger on the remote the whole time, and Di just freaks out and starts squawking and screaming, and Andrew pretends like he doesn't know how to fast forward, so he'll...
Which button? I don't know.
So he'll let the boob hang on the screen for an extra period of time. Anyways, I love that kid. So I was like, hey guys, why don't we start watching Homeland, like one episode of Homeland every night? What I didn't realize is how quickly the modern day shows cut scenes.
Right.
And then
yeah.
Just 2011, man. That's like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And Andrew's like, and Chloe, they're like, holy crap, these scenes go on forever. I'm like, you think that's something? Watch something from the 90s or the 80s.
Yeah.
But it was the ability to concentrate.
Right.
And Andrew, I saw him, he just started reaching for his phone. I'm like, boy, put that down. He's like, but the scene's going on forever. I'm like, just pay attention. And the ability to,
it changes your brain, right? Mm-hmm. So, again, doesn't make anyone bad. It's just it's the conditioning. But the problem with the unconditioned mind that can't concentrate is it's very hard to accomplish really worthy things if you can't focus on them for long enough to get them done.
Yeah.
And important work in the world, important work of building your business and changing the world requires deep concentration. So this skill, not only does it give you the capacity to lead you inward to discover the truth about yourself, but also gives you the capacity to radically focus outwardly to accomplish what you want once you figure out what the inside tells you what that is. And so they work together hand in the glove. And concentration is the bridge between being a distracted individual just kind of like following the drummer or the commercial story or whatever, the political story, whatever story is trying to influence you and take you away from being a fully autonomous human being to being a robot. Concentration then allows you to look at all that and say, no, 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 but also look inward. Turn the flashlight inward and say, yes,
Yes.
that's what I am, and that's what I want to bring to the world. But if you try to go, and this is why mindfulness meditation is so hard for people, is because, when I said just sit and quiet your mind, I was kind of like being only partly serious, because first you've got to concentrate your mind, and then you can quiet your mind. Right? And so when I say sit and do nothing, what I really mean is sit and just breathe.
Breathe.
Just breathe. But that seems like doing nothing for most people. But it's that's the most profound thing you could do.
True.
Just breathe. And then over time, this takes a while for some people, depending upon, like if they got a lot of physical training and they've learned, some concentration skills, then maybe 2 to 3 months, they're ready to move on. Their mind they get it. They get all the calming effect, the de-stressing effect, the arousal control effect of the breath, plus their mind gets much more concentrated and less distracted. Then we can go into the mindful awareness, where now we kind of let take your foot off the gas pedal a little bit. So you're still breathing, you're still aware of the box, but then you create this metacognitive distance between you and your thoughts and emotions.
What's the value in that?
Well, if you begin to see
Metacognitive distance?
metacognitive, so it's almost like, imagine your brain is a hard drive.
Yeah.
It's like splitting it into two. One of you is watching, and the other you is thinking and behaving and having emotions and whatnot. And so the watcher is always watching and always evaluating. Hey, how'd that go? Is this really serving me anymore? There's a belief system in this that I need to validate. Is that my belief system, or am I parroting my parents, or some religion or something? And so this metacognitive shift puts you kind of in the driver's seat. But it's still, Bedros, it's still from, how do I say this well? It's still from mind. It's still from kind of thinking mind. But one way to look at this is more like right brain looking at left brain.
Sure.
Right brain is about context. Like, what's the context of what's going on here? Left brain is linear. Do this, cause, effect, rational. But most people are stuck in rational. That's how they think. That's how we're taught in schools.
Right. That's how we're conditioned.
Everything. That's how we're conditioned. So the practice of concentration, and also things like bilateral movement, alternate nostril breathing, helps you open up that right brain, and then that's where you can start to seat your awareness in there and take perspective on the thinker, right? This is incredibly valuable because you're looking for the big patterns that aren't serving you. One of the big patterns that didn't serve me was the whole choice that I'd chosen to take in my life. Now, there's no bigger pattern than that.
Right.
That was a big deal.
Yeah, that is a big deal.
And when I had that metacognitive shift and I'm looking at all the decisions I made and everything, and I'm thinking and I'm feeling into that, I'm like, that's not right for me. Then I had to ask, well, if not that, then what? And this led me to the third phase. Now, this came upon me quite by surprise, because here I'm doing concentration training, and I'm doing what I now call mindful awareness. And after every training session, I'm journaling, and I wake up in the morning and I do my own version of this for 20 minutes every morning, and I'm making great progress. And I found after about a year of training that somewhere during my meditation sessions, not every time, but some time when, sun and the stars and Venus was in retrograde, and
sure, everything aligned.
Everything aligned perfectly. I would literally just disappear into some, place of unknowingness. Right?
As in, like,
I would lose my sense of time.
Okay.
I would lose my sense of self. I would forget who I was.
Would you have like an out-of-body experience? Is that,
no, not so much like I wasn't floating anywhere. I wasn't
Yeah.
like traveling to Armenia and checking out,
the goats. The goats. They only be goats, man. Nothing else.
Borat. No,
Yeah.
no, it's a different country.
Yeah. Close. I've got so many jokes I want to crack, but so many of my Armenian followers are going to bust my balls about it, so I'm just not going to crack
We won't
it.
go there. I did see the picture though.
Right. Right. Let's move on. Let's move on. So this is what I mean. This guy comes to my house the first time, we're eating steak, and we're just belly laughing like this the whole time. All right, so let's move on. Third phase, man, third phase.
It wasn't as mystical as I'm trying, maybe you make it out to be. Like, I wasn't levitating or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I would just
when you forget who you are,
I would just forget
substantial.
everything. And so, at first I thought, did I just fall asleep? And I was like, no, I wasn't sleeping. Because I did that early on.
Right.
I'm like,
yeah, I know the difference. Yeah.
I was not sleeping. But when I would come out of these places, at first, it wasn't always clear to me, but I would bring something back. Like a gift. And the gift was a sense of knowingness that I now call direct perception. And that direct perception is like coming from your spirit, or it's coming from some source that you don't know that you know.
Your higher self.
Yeah.
Your higher self.
I call that the witnessing self. So you have the process is learn how to concentrate your mind, turn that flashlight inward, create this metacognitive split, which is right brain looking at left brain. Keep training, boom! You drop even out of right brain. And now you're just in whole mind, where your mind is not your body, it's not up here, it's all around you, and information is passing freely. And your spiritual side, your spirit self, your witness, your higher self, is able to be heard.
And that's where really the deepest conversations with ourselves take place.
That's where they take place.
Is what I found.
Right. And so you can do this in a number of ways, like, through prayer, having conversation with your higher self, with your spiritual self, or with an intermediary, like Jesus or God, or whatever you want to call it. That's a powerful way to do it. But if you're really distracted, and if your mind is cluttered, and if you're asking from ego because you want something in return, there's a lot of reasons why that doesn't really work very well. But if you open your heart and you sit in silence and in prayer, which is no different than meditation, it's just a different form of meditation, and you connect to that aspect of yourself, you get answers. But you have to also be willing to listen to those answers and to be still enough to hear them. Because they don't come like in thunderous claps, like you see in the movies, where someone speaks or whispers in your ear. It's a sense of knowingness, or it's an image that pops in your head. And so I was getting imagery and a sense of knowingness that I was meant to be a warrior, not a CPA. I'm not saying there aren't warrior CPAs. There certainly are, but it wasn't my path.
Right.
I was meant to be a warrior, doing kind of gritty stuff and leading individuals in really challenging situations. I had never heard of the Navy SEALs. But as soon as I started to get that imagery, that sensation, that feeling, and I was juxtaposing it about that, guess what happened? Synchronicity. So one night I'm walking home from work and I pass this Navy recruiting office, and there's this big poster on the window, and it says, "Be someone special," across the top, and it's got pictures of Navy SEALs doing really cool shit.
Yeah.
And I was just like transfixed. I'm like, that's it.
That's like when the universe speaks to you,
The
right?
universe is speaking to me, like, that's it. And it's hilarious.
What do you walk in, you're like, hey.
Yeah, well, they were closed, but I had to go back, And I went to I was like, well, I'm going to have an MBA, CPA, I'm not going to quit that. I'll finish all that. Let me, my mind is back into rational mode. I go in there I go in the recruiter's office, and it's an enlisted recruiter. And they're like, sign here. I'm like, wait.
Can we talk about this?
Let's just talk about this.
First off, I have a couple questions.
Yeah. Can I see the movie about the SEALs?
Right.
Oh, you don't want to be a SEAL. What am I signing then? First you go in the Navy, and then you volunteer for the SEALs. I'm like, that sounds a little sketchy to me. I'm not sure I want to risk that.
Is that the route they were trying to take you?
Yeah.
Okay. Go spend some time on a boat?
Nowadays, right, exactly. Nowadays you can actually go straight into the SEALs. And they said, those guys are crazy anyways. They're a bunch of snake eaters. Obviously these recruiters had some experiences with SEALs.
Sure.
And there weren't that many SEALs back then. They were like 500 or 600. And they were still secret, and they weren't writing books.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I was like, well, I got a master's degree coming, and I think I'll go talk to the officers. And I'm like, oh, man, you're going to blow it. Man, those guys are a bunch of cake eaters. You do not want to be an officer. And I'm like, okay, well, let me talk to them at least. So I go to the officers recruiter, and Nick Philippone, this guy, super good guy. And he's like, why do you want to be a SEAL? I said, do you know anything about them? They said, nope, but I want to learn. I see the poster.
I want to be someone special.
I want to be someone special.
Because I thought about it.
Right, yeah. Put a lot of thought into this. And he's like, I don't know, man. He goes, you don't have, you probably have a better chance of becoming an astronaut. Like statistically, they take 1 or 2 guys from the civilian world every year because most of them come from the Naval Academy, officers, right? They take 20 guys a year.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I want to try. I don't want to try. I said, I want to do this. I think this is right for me. So he said, okay. So we put in an application, and I kept training, and I added visualization to my practice because I had a really powerful experience with visualization when I was in college. My swim coach was an early pioneer, like really working us with visualization. I had a really cool experience, and I said, well, visualization is something that I could use to practice becoming a SEAL.
How did you use that?
So here's my practice. This is like, I call this winning in the mind before you step foot in the battlefield, which comes from a Sun Tzu quote.
Yeah.
Victorious warriors win in their mind, then go to war. Everyone else goes to war hoping to win, something like that. So my morning routine then, it's evolved a bit, but it's not that different. I wake up and do a little movement, drink my water, get ready to go, work out the kinks, open up the chakras, so to speak.
Sure.
Then I sit and I begin my box breathing practice. First is just arousal control. Just breathe. Just calm down. Clear the mind. Settle everything down. Get into that kind of high alpha, low beta state. Then I move into concentration, like deep concentration. But, I used to do this for like 15, 20 minutes. Now I just need a few rounds to really sharpen my mind. And then I go into that meditation, that cognitive, but the mindful awareness where I'm looking for any patterns, anything come up. Is there anything that need to process, how things gone? What's going on?
You're really checking in with yourself, aren't
That's
you?
right, yeah.
You're checking in with taking inventory.
With all aspects. Checking with the cognition. What's going on in my mind? Anything. What are the, any little roadblocks, any challenges? What's going on in my day? What's trailing me? What are my issues that are floating around in my brain? Okay, if everything's good, then I kind of shut that down. Also scan the emotional body. All good. And then once I'm done with that, and so now I'm like 10 to 15 minutes into it, I literally just let go of everything. All efforting. It's almost like you're done with the work. I put the kettlebell down, and you're just like, how in CrossFit they used to lay in that sweat angel?
Yeah.
Which in SEAL Fit we were like, dude, you lay down on the floor, someone's going to kill you. You know what I mean? As soon as you're done working out, you get up and you look around, and you're ready for the next firefight, right? You don't ever lay down. But it feels like that, where you just let go of all efforting. And you just sit and softly breathe, and you almost shift it where you feel like you're being breathed by the universe instead of I gotta breathe. Just let it all soften. Release the grip on the rational mind. Release the grip on, and then let just let spirit take over. You almost drop your awareness into your heart and just let spirit take over. And so what you're doing here is listening. You're listening for spirit's guidance. And if you have any questions, any unanswered questions or thing that's troubling you, that's a good time to ask.
How do you ask that question?
Well, you just softly ask it to yourself. The more you can just allow it to be the question as opposed to get back into your rational mind and think it, or read your journal, this is the question. So it's something that you've been pondering. Right? So just sit with the question, sit with yourself and see what comes up.
Maxwell Maltz calls this the theater of the mind. Before I had learned meditation and really asking the higher self in the book Psycho-Cybernetics.
I remember that, yeah.
Maxwell Maltz calls it the theater of the mind, where you have a problem, a challenge, a conundrum, and you kind of think about it he would say, as you go to sleep, and your subconscious mind is processing it.
That's right.
Really, the more effective way, as we know now, is you could create that state. You don't have to do it the night before and then fall asleep.
You can direct the process.
You can direct the process. Yeah. Well said. Exactly. Go on.
That's cool. Well, honestly, while you said that, this is an important distinction. Now, one of the most powerful tools that I do when I do this, because I've had a lot of practice, is I have a conversation with my higher self. So instead of just asking, I actually have a mental representation of my higher self. And I have a conversation, and then I allow my higher self to answer myself. And it's extremely powerful. The answers that I get from my higher self are very different than what my rational mind thought before I asked the question. So anyways, I'm trying to get to your question because this is the way my brain works. Sometimes it's kind of a circuitous route.
We're getting there. We're good. We're good. Keep going.
So,
fascinating journey.
Once I get done with all this is kind of the meditation phase, and then I go into the visualization, which I consider different. Visualization can be used in meditation. It's more appropriate to say it's like a concentration tool.
Yeah.
Like practice visualization to get better at a skill is a concentration exercise. Whereas when I talk about meditation with my clients, it's like either mindful awareness, which is what mindfulness meditation sort of is, but we're very specific about how to do that, or pure meditation, which is where you're asking for insight and you're just looking for answers. But visualization is something different. Now, visualization, there's the practice sports piece that a lot of people know about. Very, very effective. Everybody should be doing it for performance, right? Then there's the using imagery connected to memory to revisit past experiences and recontextualize them, repower them with new emotions to let go of regrets and let go of negative emotional baggage that's holding you back. Because everything from your so-called past that has a negative attachment to it or negative association or negative memory is slowing you down. It's taking energy away from your ability to be in the present and to be productive.
Sure. Because anything from your past that has a negative association or that you've anchored in a negative way becomes modern day a limiting belief.
That's right. A limiting belief or a limiting feeling, which then triggers a limiting belief.
So how do you go back in visualization? Is there an example that you can give me where you can go back and
Sure.
kind of redefine that experience?
Yeah. So we call it recapitulation.
Recapitulation.
So in fact, that term I got from that. I love studying just what did the ancients do, because there's so much wisdom there.
Yeah.
They weren't distracted with the internet and Facebook back then, thousands of years ago. And so I've learned from the yogis and the ancient martial artists and Tibetan Buddhists and the ancient Toltecs and the Apache, and I've studied all these, fascinated by them. The Toltecs had a process called recapitulation that they required their young budding warriors to go through. So until you weren't admitted into the warrior club.
Sure.
So maybe back then it was like 16 years old you had to do this or so. Maybe even younger, I don't know. But the process was you go out in the wilderness alone. It's like their year-long kind of like trial by fire. If you don't make it back, oh well, the tiger got you. But if you make it back and you've done this recapitulation, welcome to the club.
Almost a rite of passage.
It's a rite of passage, right? Something you know a bit about. So this rite of passage was powerful. Year-long, alone in the woods. And the one thing that they had to do besides survive and hone their skills was they had to recapitulate their life day by day back to birth. And that meant every single day they had to, let's say, I have to start, okay, I go back to yesterday in my mind and I relive it from the time I wake up until the time I go to bed. And in my memory, I go through every single event and I ask, was I honorable in this moment? Did I come from a place of love or was it fear? What could have I done different or better to be a better person in that moment?
Sure.
And anytime you come upon an action that you took or a thought you had or a way that you were in the world yesterday, you pause and you say, if the answer is I could have done better, or I wish I hadn't done that, or I have a regret around that, you pause and you redo it. You see yourself doing it differently. And then you inject new energy into that and the positive belief. And then you go back and see the way you did it, and you like gray it out. And you make it small, inconsequential in your mind's eye. And then you attach forgiveness and acceptance as meaning to that instead of regret. You see, so that's an example. Now, in our lives, I don't, like with my clients, I don't ask them to recapitulate every day back to birth. You know what I mean? They'd fire me in a moment. Yeah. Like, whatever, you freak. You can't do that.
It's a hell of a client retention tool, though, huh?
Part of the linking of mindful awareness is you can, these patterns that show up, they have their roots way, way back, even epigenetic. And so what we do is we go back and we're like, oh wow, let's use one in my life, that I've been very open about in the last couple of years. I tried to be the perfect person all the way, up, and then I was like, screw that. Was alcohol, right? Because alcohol ran through both of my families for multiple generations, and it was not pretty, And so it tripped me a little up in the Navy where I had to step back and, metacognitively look at that and go, oh, wow, that could be a problem, so get that under control. And so let's say there's an issue with alcohol. So you go back and you're like, what? But you're ignoring it, right? Because you're like, I'm fine, I'm a high performer. How many high performers are there in the world who overdo it with alcohol, who overdo it with other stimulants,
drugs, sex, food. Yeah.
Yeah, it's called being human.
Yeah.
So you go back and you're like, wow, you know what? I really did something I didn't like, didn't appreciate, or hurt somebody. And what was the alcohol? I overdid it, and I was drunk at the time. And then there it was again. And then it happened again. A whole string of these situations. What's the cause of that? Instead of beating yourself up and just saying, I would go to AA or trying this boom and bust. If I quit drinking and then all of a sudden I'm all back in, never going to work.
Yeah.
Deprivation doesn't work because it brings negative attention to the problem, and that just makes it worse. So one of the profound answers is to go trace this all the way back to the root cause. And the root cause is going to be something like your father was an alcoholic, didn't give you the love you needed. He was using alcohol to cover up a wound from the love that he didn't get.
Sure.
And so then you start using alcohol to cover up the love that you're not getting, the wound from the love that you're not getting. And to be able to be aware of that and to acknowledge that and then to begin to heal that. And you can do it alone. It's just hard work. It's better to do it with a therapist or with someone who's qualified in that.
Yeah.
That type of deep work. But just going down this path and beginning the practice of using imagery in this path of recapitulation, and then what you do is you go further and further into your past, just like the Toltecs did, but it might take you years. Now, that's different than winning in your mind. It's sort of the same, but that's like winning over your past.
It's winning your past,
right?
Instead of what you're about to do.
Right, which brings you more presence and more energy, and you're not dragging those kettlebells of regret into your next action.
Yeah. That's a great metaphor.
So now you're clearing that up, and then simultaneously the win in your mind drill. So like the recapitulation, the way I do this is that's an evening practice, starting with the day. How did I do today? And eventually, here's the beautiful thing, like Bedros, if you can clear up all the crap from your past, then you've got a clean slate. Every day, all you got to worry about is how did I do today? And you're always going to screw up. Nobody's perfect. So then you just have to go back and like, look, I did pretty good then. Boy, I could have done better there. Recapitulate, clean it up, make amends if you have to. And that could be like, oh man, let me just call this person, send a text, or I'm going to make a note. And tomorrow I'm going to call Bedros and say, dude, I'm sorry. I didn't bring more steaks up, dude. I didn't know there was that precious. You had to go pull some out of your stash.
Good thing I have a backup fridge.
Exactly.
That was that fun night. That was just so fun.
So that's the beautiful thing about recapitulation. Then it becomes in real time.
Yeah.
I want to come back to visualization for winning your mind, but Nakamura taught me something profound, many profound things. But one of them was this, because he used to have like little Zen lectures after the Zen, and he had a chalkboard, and he'd sit there and write his kanji, like squeak, 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 and we're sitting there watching, like squeak, and then he would write what it meant underneath, and one of them, was one day, one lifetime.
What does that mean?
Well, he explained it to us. He said that a warrior lives every day with the mindset that it could be his last or hers, and so every action had to be very, very thought through and precise. And I don't mean like go out and have a back of an alien because it's your last day. No, it's like every thought, every word, everything on my to-do list. It's important, because if this is my last day, then I want to make sure I do the right things and I do things right. Really cool, because then that orientation has really helped me be like, okay, what's the most important thing today? I got to spend my time training, and I got to spend my time with my wife and my kid, because if this is the last day and I don't do that, I'm screwed. Wow. Right? And I want to spend time with my spirit and my faith. Do all that, good. Now I can move on. What's the most important thing for me in my business? Well, I want to work on my relationships and build my team so that they can accomplish the mission, and together everyone's clear about the mission. Well, that's my most important job as a CEO, isn't it? It's not this endless task list of doing, it's the being stuff in the team.
Yes.
One, maybe 2 or 3 important tasks there, and then I can start to work on the other stuff that's urgent but not as important, right? So that's really powerful, you know? And that's one day, one lifetime. Oh, the other thing, so that's the aspect. If today's your last, make it count. The other piece of this was kind of the flip side of that is every day has the opportunity for a lifetime of learning. Because there's nothing you're going to find tomorrow that doesn't exist today. There's nothing you're going to find 3 years from now that doesn't exist today, or 10 years from now, or 100 years from now. Everything you need, everything there is known to humanity and the entire cosmos exists today. So be present and look for it. Don't always be here or there, or here or there, and miss the truth of what is right in front of you. It's profound.
Which is today, now.
Which is right now, right? Like this. So there's this evening ritual which provides the bookend in the evening where you look back and make sure today was really good, and you clean up any regrets, and then you go to bed and ask those questions, you know, like cybernetics. So use that time wisely, your sleep cycle. But then in the morning, let's say next morning, that's the bookend to start the day.
Yeah.
So in the start, we win in our mind before we step foot in the battlefield. At the end of the day, we've already been to battle. We recapitulate and we learn and grow.
My first experience with recapitulation was with Dr. Kevin Downing. He's out here in Brea. About 9 years ago, I was having these severe anxiety attacks that just came out of nowhere. And I thought, well, they put me on Xanax, and after about 2-3 weeks of that, I was like, listen, this thing's got me numb. I'm drooling on the side of my mouth. Like, I've got no creativity. Like, it just numbed me. Yeah, okay, I didn't
Were you on Xanax when I came over that night?
That's what the drool was. I was wondering why you keep mopping up after me.
I didn't want to say anything.
So after about 3 weeks of Xanax, I went to the doctor and I'm like, hey, listen, this isn't going to work. I've got no creativity in work. I've got no desire, ambition.
Sucking the life out of you.
Yeah. He goes, well, you might have to do what most men don't want to do. I'm like, what's that? He goes, work with a therapist. I was like, all right, yeah, the pucker factor set in, right? But he referred me to someone who was horrible, but thankfully, through my research, I found Dr. Kevin Downing. And where I thought we were going to work on my source of anxiety and panic attacks, we worked through that in 4 weeks. Done. Check. On the 4th week, as I'm like, hey, doc, see you later. I'm done. Appreciate the help. You know, he taught me a few things like action alleviates anxiety, and anxiety is anticipation of future pain, and halt, hungry, angry, lonely, tired is going to trigger my anxiety. We really worked together on that stuff. And on week 4, I'm like, hey, man, I'm good. I feel good. I feel good. He goes, well, one thing before you leave, Bedros, how was your relationship with your family, with your parents growing up? I'm like, oh, it was fine. You know, coming from a communist family, you know, my dad slapped me around here and there, but what happened to me in Armenia was even worse than the slaps that he gave me, right? Like the beatings he gave me. For some reason, in 4 weeks, he had built such rapport with me that I forfeited that information. And he goes, what happened? And I just bawled and started crying. That led the next 16 months, every Monday in therapy session with him, talking through what happened to me between the ages of 4 and 6, where I was molested by 2 older boys. And one of the most profound things he had me do was to write a letter to myself, to that younger self. Yeah. And he gave me the first sentence, which was, in Armenia, between the ages of 4 and 6, I was molested by 2 older boys, but today I'm ... And it gave me the opportunity to go back, as he taught me, and to reframe what happened.
That's recapitulation.
Exactly.
Beautiful process.
And he put words to my feelings.
And writing letter is just one way to express. You can express with letters, written letters. You can express it verbally. You can express physically, like getting it out of your system.
Yeah.
I went to a training called the Hoffman process, which is all about recapitulating early childhood trauma. Yeah. It sounds like this guy was trained in the same process.
It seems like, man, I got to tell you, it was so neat. And the thing that you told me that just stuck with me, you said all of a sudden it becomes gray or it becomes small. And what he
recharges it.
Yes.
Yeah.
What he helped me identify was I was walking around and feeling shame, rage, and confusion. Shame, like I'm so embarrassed this happened to me, no one can know. Confusion, like did I invite this to happen in some way?
Why me?
Why me? And then of course the rage, like how could this happen to me? Why didn't anyone stop it? Didn't anyone know? And so the way he described it, he goes, in your life, there's these three big mountains that you're always dealing with, shame, rage, and confusion. And let's just make them into little bumps in your timeline of life, which is really what you said. Let's make them gray and go away.
Right.
And it was the most liberating feeling. And I use that process now, I guess, which is now journaling and writing to myself and recapitulating things and reframing past regrets, failures, into wins, which then gives me more competency and confidence, which creates that confidence loop to have more wins moving forward. Absolutely. It's such a powerful thing, man. And these are the things like we always talk about on the show, marketing funnels and best ads to run and how to, increase the cart value of a purchase. This is a true thing that really creates impact of growth, that massive growth. So let's finish this conversation off with one thing, which is leading a team. And it doesn't matter if it's a fire team of SEALs or leading in business, you've done both. What are some 2 or 3 great elements of leadership that everyone should adopt?
Yeah, well, let's link it to everything we just talked about, especially what you just said. If we have a big mission in life, we have to be the person worthy of fulfilling that mission. And if you prove to your team that you're worthy of bringing a big mission to the table, a big vision, a big mission, man, they'll follow you anywhere. Now, what does it mean to be worthy? It means to be doing the work like this. It doesn't mean I'm Bedros, I'm awesome, I'm the founder of Fit Body Bootcamp, one of the fastest growing franchise in the world, and here's my vision. We're going to 10x it, and you guys are all going to follow me. We're going to kick ass. You're going to earn a ton of money. Chirp, chirp, chirp.
Right.
Right? No, it's like, hey guys, what do you think? By the way, you're not going to believe what just happened to me yesterday. This was profound. Right? Like I totally screwed up, but there was a real silver lining to that because the person that I hurt, was. When I apologized, I learned that they were this person, and guess what? They're going to be another franchisee or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, like transparency.
Yeah.
But, careful transparency. I'm not saying being, like all tears every time you show up every day, because your team will start to get a little tired of that.
Sure, they're going to think you're hysterical.
Yeah, you need the emotional control, but you also need the emotional awareness and the. I hate the term vulnerability, but that's a good term, and Brene Brown has done great work. So I use the term authenticity. Because SEALs get a little prickly when you say be vulnerable. My spidey sense gets a little No, be authentic.
They didn't teach you that in SEAL training, vulnerability?
Yeah. There's a vulnerability classroom over there, guys. How come nobody's in it?
Yeah, why is it empty? Yeah.
So authentic. This is like the biggest, most important tip for leaders is your team sees through your bullshit. Like we're inside the bottle, we don't read our own label. We show up with our perfectionism and our righteousness and thinking we have to that we have all the answers, or that we have to have all the answers, or that our way is the highway. And your team is sitting back, and every time you come with one of those little judgment bombs, it just chips away at their engagement and it chips away at their enthusiasm, and then they're just doing the job for the money. And you look at studies on engagement, it's like 40% of most people's workforce or so are disengaged.
Disengaged. Yeah.
And so the best way to counter that is to be worthy of the mission, of the big vision. And so that means to show up as a real person. Take the masks off, show up as part of the team. To me, like in the SEALs, we say everyone's a leader and everyone's a follower, and it's always changing. It's like a fur ball. You never know. Even though I'm accountable, as an owner, you're accountable. And the buck will stop with you, and if things don't work out, it's your problem. And you take responsibility, even if it's very clear that Joey over there screwed up. You're like, it's on me. But when I show up with the team, none of that matters. Sometimes I'm leading things if I'm the right person to lead it, and sometimes Joey or Sally over there is leading something, either with their expertise, because they got the most energy, or they got the best idea. and everyone's always leading and following, leading and following, leading and following. And so it becomes this really dynamic mix with all sorts of energizing ideas popping up from the strangest quarters. And the team that operates at that level has a geometric, we call it 20x performance over the average team that is just coming and doing a job and, more thinking linearly, like check, 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 process, task. The elite teams where the leader has taken off the mask and says, let's figure this out together. Let's all sync up and make sure that we're all resonating the same wavelength, both in the imagery of what we know, where we're going to go, and what the boundaries for success look like, and boundaries for how we're supposed to behave and not behave, and then go autonomously conquer this thing. Not top down, data driven. I mean, you want the data, but I'm saying it's not the hierarchy world anymore. It's like a hive mind. The team is the new leader.
Hive mind.
The team is the new leader these days.
Yeah. And which really circles back to the beginning of our conversation here, because the only way the guy or gal at the top, who the buck stops with, is going to be, using your favorite word, vulnerable or authentic enough to have the confidence to go, hey, listen, I realize that I may not be the subject matter expert here, so I'm going to be a follower as Sally leads. The only way that guy or gal is going to get there is by doing all of that
doing the work. That's right.
In the beginning. So you brought us in a perfect circle, and I appreciate you for that. Yeah. If our viewers and listeners want to connect with you, reach out to you, you have so many great books, where is the place to start?
My website is markdivine.com, spelled D-I-V-I-N-E. And our training, we have two training companies. One is Unbeatable Mind, which is really the scope of what we're talking about here, like this full integrated development. We call it vertical development for leaders and teams, and we train leaders with their teams. It's pretty unique. And by vertical development, I mean we're evolving character and conscience doing this kind of work, and so that then you can go do the work of your business work.
Yeah.
That's unbeatablemind.com. And then SEALFit is our fitness, mental, physical training business that a lot of people have heard about, and I'm really taking a new whack at that to rebuild it for
that's a legendary program, man.
Rebuild it for the current generation, because it's about 15 years old now. And Instagram at Real Mark Divine. People love either two books of mine are a good place to start. One is Unbeatable Mind, which is my self-published book.
Right? I think that's the one to start with.
Yeah, that's and
what's the other one?
The Way of the SEAL.
Oh, also a great book.
Which is more of a Navy SEAL take on kick-assery.
Yeah. Which actually I listened to Way of the SEAL first many years ago, a couple years ago, and then Unbeatable Mind just followed. Wait, that was self-published, Unbeatable Mind? I didn't know that. Really?
And I'm turning that into a series, so I'm working on the sequel to that, and it's called Uncommon. So it'll be kind of like, I wrote Unbeatable Mind in 2012, and so it actually started during the pandemic. I originally was calling it Unbeatable Mind Pandemic Edition.
Yeah.
And then I realized that I've changed so much since 2012
yeah.
that it was going to be an entirely new look, a new book. So Uncommon will come out later this year, I hope, or early next year.
Well, listen, thank you for spending time with us on the show and really pouring into our audience.
Yeah.
Really appreciate
It's been
that.
an honor.
Guys and gals, here's what I want you to do as you're watching or listening to this episode. I want you to take a screenshot and be sure to tag Mark Divine and myself on it as you share it in your stories. And of course, if you got value from this episode, and I know you did, please be sure to go to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review, and I would greatly appreciate it. And as always, don't forget to tell your mama. We'll see you later.